I have recently realized that before I got sick with chronic fatigue, I may have possibly been on my feet more every single week on end than a marathon trainer would while preparing for their big race. And I want to find out together if overexertion may have played a role in leading me to chronic fatigue syndrome. But first, please welcome back to Fitness with an Illness. My name is Ryan, and here on this channel, we like to navigate chronic illness and pursue better health despite that chronic illness. And if that's something that sounds interesting to you, I'd really appreciate it if you consider liking or subscribing to the channel. It really helps us out a lot, and that way you can be up to date on all things chronic illness and health related. Thank you. Now, back to the video. So in this video, I want to take a look at how many miles I was walking/running before I got sick in relation to the number of miles that a marathon runner would run or walk while training for their big race, and see how the two compare. Because one of the possible causes for chronic fatigue syndrome is an overactive nervous system, or a nervous system that is constantly in a state of fight or flight. And so I've often wondered how I put my nervous system into that state. Was I running too much? Was I working too much? Was there stress at home? Or what was the cause? And recently I came across something very interesting about marathon training, and I think it may shed at least a partial light on why I may be sick right now. Because you see, over the course of my illness, I have learned not only from myself, but also from other people in the chronic fatigue class that I joined. Pretty much everyone in that class seems to be like me. They're the kind of person that had a hard time saying no. They were very active. They were running all the time. Some of them had jobs where they were on their feet. The point is that there are some common denominators in the type of person who is most likely to get chronic fatigue syndrome. And so there's actually a very high possibility that I was on my feet too much. I'm not going to say that was the only reason I'm sick, or that by itself is why I now have chronic fatigue syndrome, but it may have played a part in my body finally shutting down and saying, hey, enough is enough, which is why I want to look into this now. So to the people who have been following me for a while now, you probably know that before I got sick with chronic fatigue, I worked at FedEx as a delivery driver. I really enjoyed my job, but it was stressful, and you are on your feet and you're lifting heavy boxes all day long. It is a very physically demanding job. That said, I've always enjoyed physically demanding jobs. Pretty much my whole life I've had jobs where I'm on my feet and moving all day long. I've never really been a desk person. And well, now I'm at a desk all the time. But as I look back, I think I just realized that I was on my feet a lot, and I wasn't necessarily giving my body the breaks that it needed. Now, while I was at FedEx, I usually wore a Fitbit while I was working, just because I thought it was interesting to see how many steps or how many miles I got in a day. Now, on average, I usually got between 6 or 7 miles a day just at work from walking and delivering packages. There were a handful of times, like during the pandemic, where I was walking, I think, closer to 10 miles. There were several months during the pandemic where, while everyone else was inside, we were working 10 to 12-hour days to deliver everyone's packages because everyone was buying everything online. Now, I'm not going to count those days or those miles. I want to stick with the average of what was most common for me at work. And what was most common was walking about 6 or 7 miles per day. Now, how accurate is a Fitbit? That's up for debate. I always felt like they were decently enough accurate, at least in comparison to all the other trackers. Everything seemed to be relatively the same. And I can tell you this much. If there was a day where I was wearing my Fitbit and I just sat on the couch and laid in bed all day, like if I was sick or something, by the end of the day, I might have 1,000 steps, you know? And if I went to work, I'd come home and probably have like 20 or 25,000 steps. So clearly, it at least can tell the difference between sedentary and walking a lot. So there is that. Anyway, for the sake of this video, I am going to assume the Fitbit is fairly accurate, and we are going to assume that I walked on average 6 or 7 miles per day. And so that means on an average week, if we take the low number out of that, we take the 6, if I was walking 6 miles every day, 5 days a week, that means I would be getting 30 hours per week just from walking at work. Now, in my mind, especially at the time, 30 miles a week was nothing to write home about. That was just kind of, in my mind, that was extra exercise that I didn't really have to think about. Now, depending on where you're at in your own health journey, 30 miles may be a lot. For me right now, 30 miles is like impossible in a week. I would be lucky to get a mile or two right now with my health. So it's all relative based on where you're at. So, but at the time, I would not have thought 30 miles was very much. On those weeknights after I got home from work, most days I would try to go for a run. I've been a runner. I know I don't look like it now. Chronic fatigue has taken a toll on my body in more ways than one. But ever since like middle school, I was an avid runner all the way up until I got chronic fatigue, and I ran probably 4 or 5 days a week, pretty much every week from, like age 12 to 26 or something. My point is, I was in running shape. I loved to run, and someday I hope to get back to running. But when I came home from work at FedEx, I would usually run another 2 or 3 miles, depending on how I was feeling and how tired I was after work. But again, let's take the low number and assume that I ran 2 miles per day. And not only that, let's assume that 2 days of the week I'm not even running, because sometimes life happens and you're not out there running every single day. So we're going to say that 3 days a week I'm running 2 miles, just to give the lowest number possible. I tend to think more conservatively in life, and so I want to give the lowest number that I think I was doing rather than the highest. So now we have our 30 miles per week from FedEx plus my 6 miles running on weekdays. That puts us at 36 miles for the total. Weekends are a different story because I always look forward to the weekends, and it was very rare that I missed a running day on the weekend. All week long, I looked forward to the weekends because I knew I could go for a long run, and there was like no reason that I wasn't going to be able to do it because the weekends are just more open. So I would usually run at least 4 miles on the weekends. Sometimes more if I wanted to push myself, but pretty much at least 4 on both Saturday and Sunday. So let's, again, stick with the conservative number, and we'll just say 4. So on the weekends, I got 8 miles. So now we take that 36 miles, 30 from FedEx, 6 from weeknights, and 8 from weekends. Add those all together, and our grand total is 44 miles per week that I was on my feet. 30 of those were walking, and 14 of those were running. So the question then becomes, is 44 miles every week on your feet between walking and running, is that too much stress and strain on someone's body and their nervous system for it to continue, especially in a long-term sense? Because you have to keep in mind, there was no end to this. This 44 miles per week went on for years. And again, I'm giving you the lowball number. There were definitely weeks this number was significantly higher. I would do this week in and week out. I was at FedEx for about 3.5 years, and I had plans to continue going possibly for the rest of my career. During that time, I was pushing my body like this every single week without stop and without fail. And for most of that time, I think I did all right. Now, by the end, the couple weeks and months leading up to my illness, I do recall myself getting more tired. I recall myself running just slightly less. And I just kind of, chopped it up to, I'm tired. I had our first child was very young at that point, and I wasn't sure if just trying to catch up from sleep, but basically I just kind of kept trugging along, and I ran when I could, when I was able, but I did feel myself getting more and more tired. Now, here is why I bring this up, because maybe about a month ago, I somehow stumbled upon a marathon training plan. I was not looking for it, I'll tell you that. A marathon is nowhere in my near future, unfortunately. But somehow I stumbled across it. And when I was looking over the trainer schedule, I was kind of in shock in how it compared to how much I was walking and running in a given week. And so to prove my point, I'm going to take us to a training schedule from the allaboutmarathontraining.com website. This site is full of everything you need to know about marathons, how to train for them, what to eat, how to prepare yourself. Like this site is all about marathons. And so my point is, this is not just a random rinky-dink, TikTok mom marathon training plan. This is a official website that everything they do is marathon. All their stuff is like marathon studies, and like they're clearly very knowledgeable about running a marathon. And so I want to look at a few of their training schedules together so we can compare them with what I was doing on a weekly basis. All right, so on their website, here I'll go up to the top just so you can see it. So all about marathon training, this is their website. Got all kinds of information, start here, marathon schedules, nutrition, running motivation, their training shop, their blog, etc. Let me go back here, sorry. So if we scroll down to their first schedule, this is their beginner marathon training schedule. So we're going to start with the beginner and then work our way up. So if we look at our 32-week marathon training schedule, we're going to click here and it's going to show us the schedule. So we scroll down, and I really just want to look at a couple of things on each of these schedules. I want to look at the difference between week 1 and the last week. I want to look at the total miles per week and how many rest days there are on each week. Because the actual miles ran each week, I'm not all that concerned about. Because like you look at week 1 right here, and we got on Tuesday 2 miles. Okay, well that's not that crazy. But what is important to me is on the right side we have the total. So for week 1, they have 5 to 6 miles for week 1. Okay, and it seems like for the most part, Sunday seems to be the day where you do your long run. Okay, so like you start at 2 miles, and by the end of this, you're getting up to 20 miles for your run on Sunday. Run or walk. I'm a runner, so I think in running, but this works for walking too. And we scroll down here and get closer to the end of the training plan, and you will see that in weeks 30 and 32, it seems like the highest miles per week are 32 to 33 miles and 31 to 33 miles. And so this is the very last week of the marathon. You can see right here, the last run is your marathon itself, the 26.21 miles. And in that week, you run a handful of miles just to kind of keep your body in shape. And then you have a couple days of rest, and then you go do the big run. But in their final weeks, they are only running 32 to 31. In most weeks, they're in the teens, and maybe the low 20s. So you're talking anywhere from 5 miles to 30 miles per week for the beginner marathon training. I am still far above that. I'm basically 10 miles higher than this every single week without stop. Again, you got 9 miles, 11 miles, 9 miles, 18 miles, 20 miles, okay? Imagine looking at this list and putting 44 in every single one of those. That's what I was doing, okay? So that is the beginner marathon training. Now let's scroll down. Here's the intermediate. I want to see if there's like a higher, there's got to be a higher tier than intermediate. Here, let's look at some of these. So breaking 3 hours and 30 minutes, marathon 16-week training plan. So this is going to be for someone who is already a regular and avid runner. So this is not for just a beginner, but let's compare this again to how I was doing. Okay, well, never mind, because you actually have to pay to look at some of the top training plans. So I guess we can't look at those because I'm not going to spend money just to prove this point. So let's go back to the intermediate. Let's see if they at least have one for like breaking 4.5 hours. Let's see if we can do that much. Nope, you got to pay for those too. What about break 5 hours? Still got to pay. Okay, I apologize. Okay, let's just go back to the intermediate 16-week training program. So this will probably be the only one we can really look at this point without spending money. So let's scroll down to their plan. We're going to zoom in on this one a little bit because the text is a little bit smaller. So this is a 16-week intermediate marathon training plan. So again, we're just going to look at the average miles. So we got 26 to 32. We got a 41 right here, 40 to 47 miles right there in week 11, 41 to 48 in week 13. So again, you can still see that on the average week, the person training for an intermediate level marathon is still nowhere near how many miles I was walking and running on a weekly basis. Not to mention, I'm doing it repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly without end for years straight. And not only that, I meant to mention this earlier. You know how all these plans have rest days in them? I never had a rest day. Now, even if I had a day where I wasn't running, I never had a day where I wasn't on my feet getting at least 6 miles. Because even on a weekday where I would go out, or at least 4 miles, I should say, because even on a weekday at work, I'd get 6 miles. And then on a weekend where I'm running and pushing myself my hardest and running hills and, really challenging myself, and challenging myself for time, I was doing 4 miles at least. So my point with all this is just that when you look at these different plans and these different schedules, it makes it very clear to me that I was putting a lot of miles on my feet. And more than likely, I was putting far too many miles on my feet without enough rest in between. So I don't know what you think about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you are someone who is a very avid marathon runner or half marathon runner, I would really love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below to just know, what does your running experience look like? What does your training look like? Was I running too much on a regular basis? I would love just to kind of get some other people's opinions on this and know what your thoughts are, because I am just one person and it's never good to base an entire theory off of one person's experience. But to me, it seems like a lot of the stats and the information is pointing in the direction that maybe I was running and on my feet too much. Because now, whenever I manage to get through chronic fatigue and get healthy again, I want to be much more careful about monitoring how much I'm on my feet. And I want to get back to running, but I want to do it safely and effectively in a way that's not going to cause harm to my body. Because that's what I'm worried about as I look back, was did I cause harm to my body and my nervous system and put too much stress on the body? So, what do you think? I hope you found this interesting. I sure did. And if you did, leave a comment down below. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. We're trying to build a community here of sick people and recoveries who are trying to shoot towards better health and overcome chronic illness once and for all. Thank you for spending part of your day here with me. God bless, and we will see you in the next one. Adios.